better. Now we're going to concentrate on male health, focusing on the midlife transition that men go through, just like females, but rarely talk about. And really how this affects the mood, the sex drive, the longevity, the health, the sleep, and all the hormonal changes that decline with age. And I think the best way to talk about male health is, of course, to have a panel with males who either have done research about it or know at least what they're talking about. And we definitely have an eminent, outstanding panel here, if they're not part of the sleep conversation there. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Mads Friis, who will be moderating. He works a lot with entrepreneurs and leaders and athletes. And he's going to be joined by Manu, who we saw in a previous panel, and Anders Nedergaard and Dr. Jonathan Bjerre-Bastos. So please, gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Alrighty, you guys out there, if you can hear us, will you please just put your hand up? Yes, this is working. We're gonna ask you guys some questions as well, so you're not just gonna sit and fall asleep and just smile at us. My name is Mads Friis, and I got the great pleasure of hosting this panel. I got with me Manu, who's a former minister, if you don't know him already, and he also wrote a really interesting book on the things that men don't talk about, the transition that we're gonna get more into. He's also a coach. He's written a ton of kids books, so if you have kids, look it up. We also have Anders in the panel. He's a PhD. He's one of the sharpest minds in Denmark when it comes to studies, debunking different things. He had the podcast as well, MK Fitness, that's been listened to hundreds, thousands of times, going really deep. My big challenge will be getting him to speak into normal language and not like the sciences language, because he can go extremely deep on what is happening at a cellular level and all of that stuff, which is extremely fascinating, and speaks a lot about testosterone and muscle building, and his PhD is also related to that. I could go on for a long time. He's very deep when we go into science. And we also got the pleasure of a medical doctor, Jonathan Bjerre, who also have a podcast on movement and has done a lot of research as well on joints, this nicer terms about it, but for the common man or woman, the importance about that. So we have a good panel. We will keep you entertained with speaking about menopause. How do we make sure that it still can go up? Because that's a big problem for many men when they get older. So we'll talk about that. So that's a teaser to stay at least here until you hear that. Then you can leave afterwards. So that's going to be later. We'll talk about testosterone. We'll talk about what does it mean to be a man. I know that can be a really big question these days, whether it's a man or a woman. We're not going to go into that whole gender today, but we're going to go into like what can we actually do about these challenges that we face, and then we're going to take some challenges from you guys in the end. We're also going to debunk some of the mystery around what is testosterone and so on. So with that, can you please give the three participants a big hand again? Manu, you wrote a book?
I wrote a book.
Why?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't my intention to write a book, but somehow it just happened because I'm 57 now. You're in the 30s, you're in the 40s, 50s, and I just, noticed a lot of differences, changes in my body, and I think it was just after Corona. I went to my doctor and I've gained some weight and all this, the changes. I just couldn't understand anything. I didn't have the same energy and things like that. And he told me that it could be, not like andropause, but a change in transition in life. And I've never heard about that, any, changes when you face the 50s or the 40s. Then I looked into it, and I was, puzzled because much of, the things about the lives of men from 45 and up is actually bound up on testosterone, and and it goes down, and when it goes down, you really suffer a lot of things and changes. For example, your sleep will get worse, and I know that people suffer that, in age. But this was, something that I've I've never heard about that. Also, then I started making a lot of interviews, for my books, and I talked to a lot of men, and all of them could more or less, tell me about a change in life. And then we measured my testosterone and theirs, and we could actually see a decline, especially if you don't do anything. So I started, exercising and started eating well, and I lost a lot of weight. And then I also measured myself there, and I saw that my testosterone went up. The levels went up, actually. You could do a lot of things by yourself. And not only did it go up, I started sleeping much better. I started having much more energy, and so on. So I was quite puzzled that it could have a change like that. Also, that nobody told me. Nobody told me about these changes, but also about hormones that also affect men. I've heard a lot of things about women and hormones and how it affects them, their menopause, but nothing about men. So when every time I was digging, I experienced new knowledge. So that was basically the thing that puzzled me. Also, all the men that I talked to and interviewed in my book, nearly, I think all of them have suffered before their testosterone levels went down. A long time with stress. So cortisol also, I think, affects testosterone. But maybe you guys know much more about that. So actually, that was basically the approach and the path to my book that I wrote last year.
Cool. Thanks, Manu. So I work one-to-one with men as well, and I hear many men are suddenly losing the drive. They've been chasing, and you talk about it can be testosterone we can measure, it can also be cortisol. And then as you talked a little bit before, that there might be a misunderstanding that a lot of people are burned out. They don't have testosterone challenges.
Yeah, so of course there's an inherent decrease in testosterone levels with age, but there's also a lot of health behaviors that typically manifest from the 30s and onwards that are associated with decreases in testosterone themselves. And testosterone deficiency by itself is the symptoms of that are very unspecific, and a lot of them are associated with a lot of the same symptoms could be accounted for by being burned out or stress diagnosis. And in the last years, there's been a huge increase in the interest of testosterone, to some extent stemming from the manosphere and YouTubers and podcasters like Joe Rogan that are talking a lot about testosterone replacement therapy. And a lot of people have an understanding of testosterone being a main determinant of health outcomes and muscle mass and strength and libido and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's actually incorrect. So when you start exercising and you lose weight, that in it itself can explain why you sleep better. It doesn't. You don't need testosterone to increase to have that occur. And the same thing with libido. Of course, testosterone explains part of the variation that we see in the sex drive, but not all of it. And a lot of people don't see an increase in sex drive when testosterone increases or drop when it decreases. So I think people have a tendency to exaggerate the contribution of testosterone itself. It's tied in with all of the health behaviors that also influence testosterone in themselves. So it's a complicated interactive network between a lot of health behaviors and biomarkers that together produce an outcome. And I don't think that it would be safe to say that testosterone is the big one. So for example, if you see a lot of people, if they see a jacked guy walking around, they tend to assume that it's because he's got a high, of course, barring use of performance-enhancing drugs, but they would tend to explain that that's because he's got a high testosterone level. But actually, baseline testosterone levels only explain something like 20% of the variation in baseline lean body mass. So it's not a big determinant of baseline muscle mass. So that's one example where was actually very specific proof that it's not the big explainer that a lot of people want it to be.
Cool. Now we talk a lot about testosterone. Let's just, so everyone is aligned, what is a hormone? And what is testosterone? So we just understand like what it is that we're talking about, because it's...
Mind if I add a little thing?
Yeah.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So about cortisol and testosterone. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it will be sort of performance enhancing in the short run. But staying in with high cortisol levels, staying in stress will decrease performance over months. Cortisol, it keeps us in a state where we can perform, but it's also a giant off button. So although it may feel okay to stay in the stress, there's a big, you're writing a big check for yourself in the middle to longer run, which will, among other things, turn down your testosterone. Cool. So maybe if testosterone decreased primarily, that would increase cortisol. But I think in most cases, and more likely, it's the other way around, so that stress will, through cortisol, potentially decrease testosterone.
Cool. So if we quickly just go into like 3 to 5 minutes, quick biology session. What are hormones? What is testosterone? What are receptors? So we kind of understand like what are all these fancy words that we are swinging around, and then we can talk about how to increase it.
I can take that one. So the notion of hormones actually only came into existence around the 1910s, 1920s. And it's the very notion that you have substances produced somewhere in the body that has actions other places in the body. Almost all hormones are primarily carried through the blood, and then they interact with receptors that for peptide hormones are on the cell surfaces and then initiate signaling cascades that makes the cells change in some way. For steroid hormones like testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, vitamin D, and so on, they have nuclear receptors instead. So the steroid hormones, they're fat soluble, so they can pass through the cell membrane into the cytoplasm of the cells, and that is why they can have their receptors inside of the cell. It's called nuclear receptors. But it's pretty much the same thing that when the receptors have been activated, to some extent they start signaling cascades, and to some extent they start transcription of genes at the chromosome level.
Yeah. And if we had to say that for a person that sits with PowerPoint and Excel, as I used to do back in the days, then you can say hormones is kind of like messengers, and that is the key, and then there's a lock, which is kind of the receptors. So you need to have some locks if you have to very, very simplify it.
And then you have a new chain of messengers after the lock has been opened.
Yes.
A lot of extra messengers, actually.
Yes.
A lot.
So when we look at testosterone, what is that mainly like responsible for, since we talk so much about it?
So in the embryonic condition, it leads to primary sexual differentiation. So by default, fetuses have sexual organs that looks more like a girl than a boy. So that is what causes the penis to form initially. And that is called the primary sexual differentiation. There are also some primary sexual differentiation happening in the brain as well. But there's some in utero going on. And then stuff is kind of silent until you hit puberty, where what is called secondary sexual differentiation occurs. And in boys, of course, that is the deepening of the boys. We get an Adam's apple, the penis grows, increased muscle mass, bone mass, strength, increased libido, increased stupidity, and risk-seeking behavior as well. I think isn't that most of it?
That's a man.
That sums it up well.
Fantastic. So why is it for adults that we talk so much about testosterone?
Come again?
Why do we talk about testosterone so much when it comes to men?
That is because masculinity is a social hierarchy that has been imposed upon us, and being more manly, whatever it means, having a bigger penis, having sex with more women, having larger muscles, being stronger, is a pervasive social hierarchy that is very hard not to partake in to some extent.
Cool. So how do we win that game, as we are very competitive as men? all the men down there sitting like, okay, enough. Tell me how to win. Tell me how to get it higher up, more strong. Tell me how to have more energy, more drive. What are the natural things that we can actually do?
Well, I think they had a sort of the same talk as we're having now on women's health yesterday, and I think many of the things that will increase women's health are the same for men. So, you heard it here first. So it will be, improving sleep, eating better, if possible, losing weight. Of course, if you're obese, exercising. Alcohol, decreasing alcohol intake.
More alcohol.
They used to say that 1 unit a day is good. Not so sure that's the recommendation anymore. Lowering stress.
You're losing the audience now, Jonathan.
Am I?
So one drink of beer or one glass of wine a day, you don't recommend that any longer.
No.
Yeah. The evidence changed a lot.
Primary reason I would not recommend it. People would probably do it anyway, but if we recommend 1 unit, they would drink 2, because at least that's the culture in Denmark. 1 is 2. So it's better to not recommend it at all, and perhaps people will stay at a reasonable level. And the main reason why I wouldn't recommend it is because of gut health, and it's something I experience myself. I can feel a direct impact on my gut health.
Cool. And just for context, I was having dinner with Jonathan the other day. So it's not that Jonathan never touches alcohol. So when he says this now, it's like what is ideal for the human body, not is what is the life that he also likes to live, having potentially out of Friday night a glass of wine or 2, and he's doing so many other things, so he can still do that and have fairly good testosterone levels.
The only thing that overrules health, in my humble opinion, is what contributes to your good life. So health is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily come first.
Anything else we're missing on the top list is the most important before we go into the exotic Tonkat, Ali, Huberman and other interesting drugs that doesn't, or supplements that might not have that much of a difference, more like the 1%?
You can do a lot because, I measured myself over 3 years, and I agree with you. Testosterone is not everything, but that was a marker for me because I was curious, and I didn't take any testosterone therapy or cream or anything, or pills or ejection or anything, it went up and down, and it was clearly for me what could get it up, and it was, as you're saying, exercise. Having weight training, also eating well. I don't drink alcohol. I don't eat meat. A lot of people are thinking, you have to eat a lot of meat to have high levels of testosterone. You don't have that to do that. And sleep and all the things, And then I also tried to stop, eating a lot of sugar and drinking alcohol, stop exercising. And it was so clear, the testosterone level went down. And now, for the fourth time, I'm trying to eat well again and eating vitamins and so on. It's going up again. Yep. So I think it's very clear what happens to me and also the other people I've interviewed in the book.
And how fast does it change?
Potentially very fast, depending on how strong inhibitory behaviors you have. If you've got very strong inhibitory behaviors, if you're sleeping really bad, being really stressed, being all that kind of stuff, and you change it, you can see changes in a few weeks, maybe even as little as a week, but I would say definitely 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, I stopped exercising, all those things. Pia Norup, your friend, she measured me, and it went down to 16 from 23. It's...
Yeah, so the more drastic things we do, the faster we can change it. If we live fairly consistent, it changes less, would be a way of saying it. But it's not something that just changes over like an hour. I've heard someone talk about that if you sit young men into like a beaten up car, and if you set them into like a sports car, that you could actually measure that in the sports car the testosterone would go up. I haven't read the actual study. I've only heard a doctor talk about that.
But there are lots of temporary short-term fluctuations in testosterone that have an important role in immediate behavior regulation. So acute horniness and
that goes up.
Winning a football match. I think if you put the guy in a smashed up car, it's on a field with 10 other smashed cars with guys in them, then you'll probably see the testosterone increase as well. And if you win a soccer match, you can see
you can see it in minutes.
Yeah. So the very minute short-term changes are important for behavior regulation. The long-term regulation is important for the more physiological long-term stuff.
So when some men I heard by friends, they see beautiful women and they get more energy. And they
it might be something else.
Okay.
But interestingly, when men get into a relationship and have kids, their testosterone drops significantly. Yeah. So I don't know what happens if you're in an open relationship or stuff like that. But I think that's been examined in.
Single men they've got higher levels of testosterone.
And even getting divorced results in increases in testosterone afterwards. So of course, don't get married, don't get kids. It's terrible for testosterone.
So we got the advice: sleep.
Flip it and say, well, it regulates our behavior, and that's probably, you're allowed to disagree, probably a good thing. I'm married, I have 2 kids. You know, it's good for me to suppress my extremely high testosterone levels, so I don't run out and do things that I'm not allowed to.
Stupid penis things.
Exactly, stupid penis things.
Yes, you're thinking with the right head. Cool. So we kind of sum it up. We have sleep is important. We know that. We just heard about that. We know exercise is important. We know nutrition is important. Here I think it's important to mention protein, something that I see a lot of people are getting very, very little of. We also mentioned stress is extremely important. Then we have the not as popular, getting divorced, don't get kids, helps as well, but that's not recommended from the audience up here. What are some of the supplements that we actually have backing behind can make a difference?
So what kind of evidence levels do we accept?
That's a good question. What evidence level would you accept to do it yourself, or give it to someone that you care about?
So in the biggest scale of things, nothing really works for testosterone. On average. But if you have so, for example, zinc supplementation. So zinc deficiency will result in suppressed production of sex hormones. And if you have zinc deficiency, it's fairly rare in Denmark. So that's like perhaps 3, 5, 8%, a little bit more in older individuals. Then that may actually be something that can increase. But on the average, the answer is definitely no significant effect. And the same thing goes with a lot of the herbal supplements like fenugreek and you mentioned tonkarali and Tribulus terrestris and stuff like that. But the whole supplement stuff is a huge clusterfuck. Because, so I think one of the most popular ones is probably ashwagandha. So it's used as an adaptogen, and some people says it has effects on testosterone as well. And some people have reported it with testosterone measurements even. The problem with those kinds of supplements is that most of those are based on extracts, and you can make extracts from herbs in a lot of different ways. You can do it in water and alcohol. You can make phenolic extracts. You can do it with steam. You can do it at different temperatures and different pressures. And guess what? Different extracts have different stuff in them. And of course, that will mean they have different effects. So when you look at ashwagandha, and you can see that they have, 50 different studies in some, and you can see that they have used different extracts. You don't actually know what the fuck you're looking at. That's really, really difficult when you're trying to interpret the literature on that.
Yeah, the problem is there's no big studies about, with all these supplements. We only have, people telling that, okay, this helped me, and there are a lot of different kind of brands as well. But vitamin D, a lot of people,
Not a causative effect. It doesn't increase testosterone.
But a lot of people are saying that's actually helping them, and no big research about that. And
there is.
Okay, but not about. I haven't seen anything about with testosterone and vitamin D?
It has been done.
Okay.
Testosterone D-supplementation does not influence testosterone
okay.
levels.
Okay.
But it's associated, they co-variate.
Yeah.
So if you
So
have
many people take that.
so if you have low D vitamin levels, and you start supplementing with D vitamin.
Yeah, many people in Denmark, I think, how many percent just have...
in February, it's like 25%, 30%.
Okay.
But there's no causative relationship. If you supplement with vitamin D, it doesn't increase testosterone. But a lot of the same factors that are causing low testosterone are also causing low vitamin D.
Cool.
So, and if you're tired because you have low vitamin D, you could have simultaneously low T. And which of them does what? It's difficult to answer that question.
Yep.
And it's very plausible that if you have vitamin D deficiency, so if it's very low, that it could influence the production of testosterone, in my opinion.
But if you're very low, there's a lot of different stuff going on.
Absolutely. I want to comment on the supplement thing. I agree with Manu that usually the evidence is low quality. It's almost, if not always, funded by industry. That's a problem itself. They usually don't replicate their research, and when it's replicated, it usually doesn't show such great effects as primary studies. So yeah.
Terrible study quality.
Usually.
So one of the things with the supplement industry is that a lot of supplements are traded in something called branded ingredients. So if we take the example with ashwagandha, for example, one of the most known versions of ashwagandha is called KSM66. So, and that's a specific, I don't know the name of the company, they own this brand and they're interested in, so they're paying for studies to have done on that. And a lot of those studies are done in not totally independent labs, and they're often published in journals with a less than stellar peer review process. And then you end up with a lot of shitty studies, but they're still in the literature. And it actually requires a pretty good eye to say that that's probably a shitty study, and that's not a shitty study, because to the layman, they will go on PubMed and say, hey, there's a study.
I don't even think people will go to PubMed. The thing is that people are listening to Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman, and guys like them, and they are talking about Tonkat Alley. They are talking about all of these supplements, and maybe it helped them, maybe it didn't. We don't know, but they're talking about it as it was science. So that's why people are buying it, and they're buying it a lot.
And another good reason why people are buying it is because of the placebo effect. I'm sorry to ruin it for everybody, but whenever you take something that Joe Rogan talked about, it will work only because of your expectations. That's just the game. So that makes it very easy for those companies. It's extremely hard to prove any effect, but just merely the belief that it will work makes it work.
The Joe Rogan effect.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan effect.
Not the placebo.
One more thing. I was under the impression that creatine actually could do something for testosterone, and you're probably good to answer that, Anders.
Yeah, so testosterone influences the conversions to the testosterone metabolite called DHT, and that may actually DHT is involved in some of the process related to male pattern baldness and some of the prostate effects. And while it's not reported in the literature as something that, like, it is not accepted as a side effect, I know people that actually lose their hair from taking creatine, and that started getting their hair back when they stopped taking creatine.
And perhaps could feel negative effects prostate-wise.
The only thing I've heard about, like with an acute measurable effect, was on the hair, but it's not accepted in the literature as a side effect. But I've seen several people where this happened.
So you don't think there's an effect of creatine on testosterone that's useful, so to speak? Is it just side effects, or will it have some of those desired effects also?
I don't think so. I'm not sure at all.
Cool. So summing up, when we hear people sharing, also examine.com, which is a website that sums up, they say that D vitamin, they say that magnesium and zinc are the three things that actually has studies behind it that they qualify as. They don't have in the highest kind of qualification, but they have it in fairly high studies. But you would disagree that those are probably like not good quality studies, or curious that there might be new studies that could validate that it can have an impact on the body.
So it depends on the evidence threshold you're willing to accept.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also big studies are very expensive, so they won't just make it, and they can't afford it, so it's
We
impossible.
should fund a magnesium Big Mac. We don't
But it's a general challenge with many of the natural things is that there's no one that has an incentive to pay the millions to do the studies.
exactly.
Oh, but that's with the branded ingredients.
Yes,
That's where that works. But
Yes.
that's a shitty mechanism.
but that's also why we're missing many studies on many natural things, because who should spend all those millions? If you have a company and you can kind of protect it, why would you spend 10, 20 millions on good quality studies?
But
right?
the thing is also, you can talk about big studies and blah, 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 blah. But look at this exhibition here. You've got a lot of people, saying, okay, this will help, this will help. Just look at this guy over there, Fullkornshauer or something. And, I know they don't have any probably no big studies, and we could also say, okay, we won't take anything if there's no big studies, and you could, and that's just bullshit, because you have to try and find out what's working for you. And luckily, more and more people are doing that. And more and more people are taking these vitamins and supplements and so on. So, we can't just sit on our asses and wait. Oh, okay, we don't have any big studies, because we have to make a change. And there's always something about big studies and big money and big pharma as well. And they've got the money. So, if they decide, okay, we'll make big studies with vitamin D and magnesium and zinc and everything and testosterone, okay, we could wait for that. But we could also do something by ourselves. And that's what's happening now. And this is a part of it, luckily.
I know you have a comment, Jonathan, but time-wise, I'm going to have to steer it away so we can get another subject. But summing up, there's different approaches. We can make sure that we have the best studies and wait for that. We can test things out, ideally with data where we get measurements as well to see, are you actually feeling better? Is it actually doing something? So you can see, are there any markers that are getting better? Those are two different approaches. But we have to speak about TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, which is becoming so popular, and most people here have probably heard about it or seen all the Americans that are taking big doses.
But what I was about to say is also relevant for TRT, because what you need to start with, if you for some reason think that you have a testosterone problem, if you want to increase your testosterone in some way, you need the basic health in place, because people really don't want to do that because it takes effort. It's difficult. You need your sleep, you need your exercise, cardio, and hypertrophy training. You need all the basics, the diet, and then perhaps it sounded like for Manu it worked with the lifestyle changes. So why would you even consider pharmacological therapy?
I would never do that because it stops your own
no
production of testosterone. I would never do that.
Just cutting in on time. Appreciate the different input. TRT, Anders, what is it? Why is it getting so much fuss in the US? And is it something Danish men should look at, or should they just send like the cross that this is horrible big pharma? Like, what's the deal?
So I think we're back to Joe Rogan as to why it's big in Denmark now. It's something that's really been imported from the manosphere of podcasters and YouTubers. So TRT stands for testosterone replacement therapy, and it's practiced in a pretty, radical way in the States. Most people are get it by prescriptions from chiropractors because they can make prescriptions like doctors over there. And I think we're back to the social hierarchy of not even masculinity, but hyper-masculinity. So when people a lot of guys, when they turn 40 or 50 in the States, they can't cope with life. It's not the same as when they were 25, and they have to do something so that it becomes more 25-esque again. And that's what they do. But a lot of the people that get testosterone therapy in the States, they get very... so I wouldn't, first of all, normally, in order to, like in a clinical term, call it testosterone replacement therapy, there would have to be a deficiency to begin with. You would have to have clinically significant hypogonadism, where you have both abnormally low levels of testosterone and subjective symptoms of low testosterone levels. Most of those guys in the States, they don't have hypogonadism. They're just in the low end of the normal for adult men, because that is where you are when you're an average adult man, especially if you're kind of fat and in poor shape. So I would argue you against calling it replacement. And then the second part is it actually healthy? Because I think the evidence is with the dosages they're doing in the States, there's more evidence that would suggest that it's unhealthy than it's actually healthy. It may be fun. I won't argue with that, but I would guess that it would associate with an increased risk in cardiovascular diseases. So I would also argue with calling it a therapeutic. So let's call it testosterone supplementation.
Got it. For time, Jonathan, sorry, we have 2 minutes left. So the reason to not do it would be the cardiovascular diseases?
And suppression of these
but
ones.
some studies are saying the opposite. So, that's not the issue.
I'll fight you on that.
Yeah, but I didn't make the studies. The issue is that if you take testosterone, your own production will stop, and that's something that you just don't want to play with.
Yes, so
fertility. The tadpoles are.
Yes. So if you're 60 years old and you're low energy, some people are starting to that. Is that like a total no-go, or are there some people that should actually look into it where it's not just like a supplement boost, but a therapy? What do you guys think?
Well, so I think Jonathan put it very well. So you'd still have to clean up the health behaviors.
But we assume that the person has already gone through all the stuff. So
Yeah.
we look highly at people. We regard them as being responsible adults that take ownership of their life. They've done that. They're still having problems.
So
Is it then a good option, or is it then still bad?
You should see somebody with experience, of course. An experienced doctor, go to a clinic where they actually know what they're talking about. And then if you have those basic things in place, I think it's completely fair to go down that path. But before that, no.
Cool.
And to put it another way, if you have some of these symptoms which are very unspecific, let's say you're tired, it's not because your body is lacking coffee, but coffee will help. Did you find the answer? Did you find the reason because coffee helped for your tiredness? No. It's just because,
Cool.
of course it will help.
Fully agree on that. So I think that's also what we covered in the start. Like, so the foundations first. Don't try and do like these shortcuts. We need to make sure that we have the foundation right. If you're still having massive problems, then it might be worth starting to look into, is this something for you? But not before you've done the fundamentals, because
Have
then
to do everything first.
Yeah.
So I'm 45, and a couple of years ago I started being targeting by pretty aggressive Facebook and Instagram ads from doctors' clinics that was like saying, "Are you not feeling manly enough?" in a lot of different ways. So there's sprung up these doctors' clinics where I think they're pretty frisky with the prescriptions for testosterone. And I think they're speaking into this social hierarchy of hypermasculinity that we're getting from the States, and I think that's problematic.
So one could say it's like most pharma. It can be fantastic if used right, but when overused is a problem. When we don't look at fixing the root causes first, the healthy lifestyle, and we just put drugs on it, like kind of like you're driving a car and you see the lamp is like red, and you just put duct tape over and like, there's no more red, it's perfect, let's continue driving, let's put the speeder even more on now because now I got the testosterone.
Yeah, but it's not so easy, because I know a lot of doctors, and it's in Denmark. It's not possible to just hand out testosterone cream and stuff like that. You have to, look at the, holistic, at the health, and you have to look at all the other things. And if you do, the Lægemiddelstyrelsen or Sundhedsstyrelsen, they'll actually, be scrutinizing you. So it's not easy just giving testosterone as lollipops or anything. Of course, you have to be wise when you do that.
20-second comment.
Yes, and if you go to a clinic and they don't start with all the basics, if they just, talk about, okay, here's the prescription and this is how we do it, then you're in the wrong clinic, in my perspective at least.
So if you go to the clinic, you have the challenges, and they just give it without asking you about your lifestyle, your sleep, all the things that we heard about here, it's a good time to walk out of the clinic again. and find another clinic that actually makes sure to ask those questions about it. But then it might actually be something. But it's not anyone from here. I sound like I'm very pro. I think I'm, like most people say, I'm very anti doing the stuff. But I do hear stories from some people that have been doing all the stuff, that are sleeping, that are doing the work, where some people have had some good results afterwards. And I also hear the stories about people that are just jacking themselves up, that are not exercising, they're not eating right, and then they're just getting some juice, and then they feel like they're on top of the world. And that's not what's being advocated. So for most things, it can be used for good or for bad. Our time is running. If you have questions, come. We need to take our microphones off and so on. I think we're getting kicked off the stage very soon. So please give the three gentlemen a big hand.
Thank you all for sort of really taking us on this trial or path of male health, which is as important as female health, because these are both factors that haven't really been dived into. And